You know, they didn't have this terrific offense. And then the Bears even, I mean, again, historically great defense, the awesome Walter Payton, but Jim McMahon is your quarterback.
But that Bears team, though, despite everyone says Jim McMahon was the quarterback, they scored the second most points in the NFL that year.
Right.
They were
but
a great
McMahon
offense.
is not a great quarterback. Look, I think for one-offs, he has a point because you got what's looking like a really good quarterback right now. You know, we got two really good receivers, a defense that was second in points, first in total defense, probably certainly an all-time performance for a season by a running back. And then, Nick, them blowing out the Chiefs, who were an all-time great team. That says a lot, too. So I think as far as one-offs, they got an argument, but they just, I think, to officially be in the top 5, they have to continue to get close or win.
Even for one-offs, they're not one of the, as far as single seasons, they're not one of the 10 best teams ever. And I think, like, now.
What are you going to base that on?
So I'll explain it in a second. But now, top 5 most dominant Super Bowls ever.
Oh, yeah. Doesn't that play into it?
Of course, but it's
especially against the Chiefs.
No, that's why because there have been a bunch of Super Bowls used to all be blowouts.
Right.
There have been a bunch of Super Bowls where teams won by far more than 18, and we can even say if this one they really won by 30 because that's what it was when. But we saw the Cowboys, the Niners over the Chargers. It's because who they beat that it looks better. But the 5 best teams, in my opinion, of all time, most of them are quite a bit older, and we can show you the 5 best ever, and I can give you the resume. 72 Dolphins, the number 1 offense, the number 1 defense, literally went undefeated. The 78 Steelers, number 5 offense, number 1 defense, went 14-2, doubled up their opponents in the playoffs, 102-46. The 84 Niners lost 1 game, number 2 offense, number 1 defense, more than tripled up their opponents in the postseason. The 85 Bears, number 2 offense, number 1 defense, 15-1, outscored their opponents in the postseason 91-10.
That's pretty good.
And the 92 Cowboys, number 2 offense, number 5 defense, almost tripled up their opponents in the postseason, went 13-3. The Eagles, for the record, number 7 offense, number 2 defense, and almost doubled their opponents up in the postseason, 145-77, because Game 1 against the Packers is a 6-point game or a 7-point game with 7 minutes left, and 6-point game. And Game 2 against the Rams have on 13-yard line, down 6 with a minute left. Then they had thoroughly dominant after that. The reason I said not one of the top 10 is if we just do the last 30 years.
I was going to say, because the thing about those teams, and I'm sure you know it, they all were pre-free agency.
Correct.
So you got to stack, tons of Hall of Famers.
So, but I think in the last 30 years, and there's one team that Wilds might take issue with on this, because they didn't win the Super Bowl, so maybe Brew will. But I think in the last 30 years, the 5 best teams are, and again, this isn't 1 through 5, this is chronological order. The 98 Broncos, who tripled up their opponents in the postseason. It was their 2nd straight Super Bowl. They went 14-2. They had the number 2 offense. The 99 Rams, who everyone thinks that they were just offense, number 1 offense. They also had the number 4 defense. They went 13-3. They outscored opponents in the regular season by 284 points, a record at the time. The undefeated Patriots, who are the greatest football team I've ever seen. They didn't win the Super Bowl, and
you can't put them in though. I agree with you. They're the best looking. They're the greatest team I saw, but they didn't close the deal.
But so, and then the 16 Patriots, which I think was the best Patriot team ever that won the Super Bowl, and the Chiefs, the first year of this 3 straight Super Bowl run, or when Mahomes won MVP and they were still light show on offense, and the defense was excellent by the end of the year. That to me is the fight. So most dominating Super Bowls, best final 3 quarters of a season. Like there's a lot of things where we can do, but I just don't think there is a fair argument that of all the single seasons we've seen in NFL history, one of the 5 best was the one we just saw from Philadelphia. I just don't. And
I think you make a good point, but you mentioned the blowout Super Bowls. Most of those blowouts, I wouldn't say, dare I say, if all of them, weren't against historically great teams.
Well, the Bills one is weird because the Bills the 92 Cowboys, they blew out a Bills team that at that point, though, they had been to 2 Super Bowls, lost one on a heartbreaking field goal, another one, or missed field goal.
But you can't compare them to the Chiefs.
No, I'm not.
The Chiefs got the best quarterback we feel like
I'm not comparing them to the Chiefs. I'm saying it's not, they weren't all like the Niners.
They were good teams. They got to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
They were good teams, but this was a historically great team, the Chiefs, and still is, in the midst of a dynasty, and they shellacked them. I mean, I think that has to count for something.
Who were they were the 7th best offense?
Yeah.
Yes.
So were there other teams like I know the Lions had the best offense. You don't have that list. I don't mean to
Bengals, Lions.
The Bengals are up there, didn't make the playoffs. Like I wonder if there were so many teams that were just like so focused on offense that because are they getting penalized because they weren't?
No, I mean they're not getting. I don't even understand what you mean. Like the
Bengals had no defense, so they just aired the ball out. So now they're ahead of them.
This isn't yardage. This is points. I'm doing it.
If
point
they
score.
come back and win it this year,
that still doesn't make last year's team a top 5 team of all time.
I think it would change the perception in people's minds.
I just don't think they have the.
Has anyone seen my other flip-flop?
Where on earth is this thing?